So I have a lot of stuff coming this week. I'll be covering All In and some of the ticket sales stuff as that develops. I will be covering Backlash this weekend, and my draft video is going to come out tomorrow. I'm recording it straight after this. But I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while. I'm going to talk about NXT. So let's dive into that. Hello and welcome to FTTR. I am Hugh McQuaid, and today we are talking about NXT. In particular, we are talking about the NXT roster, and is it the best roster NXT has ever had? But before we answer that question, please hit subscribe, please like this video, please comment your thoughts down below as we dive into this heated topic. So for anyone who is new to the channel or anyone who doesn't know, NXT was my gateway drug back into wrestling. Like I think it was for a lot of people. You heard the buzz about takeovers, and you jumped on board at that point. So I have a deep affinity for NXT. I watched consistently. My first show that I watched was Takeover. I want to say it was Brooklyn, but I could be wrong. I think it was Takeover Brooklyn, and it was the Bobby Roode, Drew McIntyre match, where Adam Cole, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly made their debut, and I followed it through to the NXT 2.0 era, and that was when I dropped off. But it seems like now NXT is making strides to become more consistent with what we loved about NXT going forward. So the old NXT, the spirit of NXT, was basically supercards with the best indie talent from around the world who'd been scooped up and put into WWE. Now, following the draft especially, it looks like we're getting back to that. It looks like NXT is defining itself and having a clear, consistent character within itself as a brand. So I want to run down some of the names who have stayed in NXT and how they can be utilised to create the best roster and the best wrestling product that WWE puts on. So we've got to look back at the SmackDown 6. The SmackDown 6 was something I believe was devised by Paul Heyman back in the early 2000s, and that 6 top guys would be featured on SmackDown. That can now be put to NXT, but the thing with NXT right now is you can have 6 people per division. It is that stacked. But I think the beauty of the draft is they've removed some of the excess from NXT because we haven't had big NXT call-ups in a while. So having, it was like 18 or something like that. It was like 18 names moved up to the main roster. You got to think they merged NXT UK and NXT, and they haven't had call-ups for a long time. You're going to end up with a bit of bloat. You're going to have a bit of excess, a bit of people who aren't doing what they can do, or people who have just stuck around in NXT and have done what they can. People like Apollo Crews, people like Grayson Waller, who have done everything they can in NXT and now are being transitioned to the main roster. So my idea for an NXT 6, for the main title, let's dive into that, because if I were Shawn Michaels, there's some guys that I would build that main event scene around. You've got to think, you're going to build that main event scene right now around Dijak, Ilya Dragunov, Bron Breakker, obviously the champion Carmelo Hayes. You have got Tyler Bate. I would easily slide him in there. And Dragon Lee. That right there is your 6, your NXT 6, who can flutter in and out of programs and have really interesting stories going on there. And then let's talk about the North American title scene, in which there's a lot of other guys that you can put in there, but my 6 that I would build the North American title scene around is Charlie Dempsey, Joe Gacy, Nathan Frazier, the champion Wes Lee, Axiom, and hell, throw Scripps in there. Let's throw Scripps in there because, he's come a long way. Right there, you have really interesting divisions that can put on classic wrestling matches. You all know Ilya Dragunov is one of my favourite wrestlers of all time and should be NXT champion. But putting him in there with the likes of Dijak, which I think we're getting next week, putting him in there with Carmelo Hayes, Bron Breakker, you've got all these really interesting dynamics right there at the top of the card bubbling away, and seriously bubbling away in the undercard as well. So I think it's really, really interesting in that regard. The only division that I think has suffered is the tag team division, because you've lost pretty deadly. And there weren't that many high-profile tag teams there already. Like, I am a Gallus defender, but they are not, top-tier NXT tag team division material, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm looking at people like The Revival and DIY and AOP and Undisputed Era, all those really cool teams like that. So you've got, Chase U, you've got Gallus, you've got Schism. I don't think that's necessarily the strongest division. But then you look at the women's division as well, and who's left with the women's division. You've also got an insane amount of people that you can put up there. Like, obviously, you've got to have Miko Satomura there. Like, if you've watched my videos long enough, Miko Satomura should be a common presence on NXT TV. You've got Blair Davenport, Cora Jade, Gigi Dolan, JC Jane, Lash Legend, Sol Ruka, Tiffany Stratton. There's so many, including the now vacant NXT Championship. We're going to get a tournament. We love a tournament, do we not? So I think, again, that's just a really interesting division. And now that it's been not necessarily gutted, but it's been leaned out, and you can give more time to people who weren't necessarily making TV now, I think there's a really interesting way that you can rebuild NXT into something new and something that can really get fans back on board and become that work rate show again. So for me personally, it's difficult with NXT, it's difficult with RAW and SmackDown because here in the UK, it's behind a paywall on BT Sport. So it's difficult to watch not on a delay on the WWE network. But I will be interested in seeing where the divisions go and how this plays out. Like, I'm definitely interested in checking out Ilya Dragunov versus Dijak. I think that's a great feud and a great match that I really want to follow. And I think the stuff they're doing with Bron Breakker and Carmelo Hayes is quite interesting. Bron Breakker is a heel. So there's a lot of stuff to dive into with NXT. But to answer the question of this video, is this the best NXT roster ever? I don't think it is. As much as I love, and I do love, the current crop of NXT, as I hopefully have come across in this video, I will always have a soft spot for my era of NXT, in which you had Aleister Black, you had Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano, Ciampa, Andrade. It sucks to say now, but Velveteen Dream, who was, really good despite, all the awful stuff that's come out about him. Plus the NXT UK guys coming over, like Pete Dunne, like Tyler Bate, and then the tag team divisions, obviously Undisputed Era, running roughshod, North American Championship stuff, Ricochet in there. That's my era of NXT that I think was the peak of NXT, at least in terms for me. But obviously the old NXT with the Kevin Owens, with Cesaro, with Neville, with Sami Zayn, Shinsuke Nakamura, Samoa Joe. There is a really big talent pool in terms of past NXT rosters. But this is giving them a run for the money. I think if they build this division correctly, you will end up with a really, really solid show. And I'm really excited following the draft, probably most excited for NXT. I think it looks really good on paper. And I'm excited to see how this plays out. So yeah, that's my rambling about the NXT roster. I want to know what you guys think about NXT down in the comments below. And I'll try and apply to every single one of them. Thank you all ever so much for your support. And have a nice day.